And we're back for the next episode of the story of both. I just hooked the mic onto the camera straight, so we got the whole thing in one. Works better that way apparently. And then back here we got Chuck and Lemmy sticking their thumbs up from wherever they went to have some more fun. So where were we and where are we going? Oh yeah. The story of both, page 17. The altered shape of the floating stander had also altered its existence. Once fully grown to be that strong, earth-bound, sky-reaching vessel of fortitude and longevity, it had lost most of its now underwater growth and found a precarious balance heeling around its trunk. The nesting man, like a squatting bird, wove the broken and middle branches into the sides and over the top somewhat. And when running across a whirlpool, he found that by leaning strongly against the side of a root stump, he could alter the course of his living vessel. Now with the once high up tip floating in first, he gets a sensation akin to walking, moving towards something as well as away. For though he cannot really walk on his nothingness of water, crazing him in hues of blue, green, brown, grey, and depthless black, he starts to get a sense of control of motion, a synergy of direction with the flow of tide and time, a perpetuity whilst remaining on the spot yet moving, strange and wondrously new, as always dangerous as somewhen pleasant. It's different, this. Not moving, yet going somewhere. Not like hiding in dark or by leftover hot sky flames that turn everything hot, black, smoky, and dead. When the four-legged lay skinless and without any red left in them, but easy to rip apart and bite till he was full and weary. Busy and alert in sight, while outside motionless, except for crawling up and down the trunk to shelter or push the root stump and see where it would go. Under his hair was a feeling of black and yellow winged ones, who get ferocious like one beast when you take their sweet stickiness out of their nest. Their humming, when alone and floating through the colored greens, settled in his throat and tuned to the subtle singing of the waters as they pushed through the branches and guided them on through nowhere. Past, present, unknown. As time came into being, so did a grasp of being in control, yet far from total, as the flow of life keeps any man in bounds enthralled. He has no idea of time, no idea of ideas, only realizing he is slept by awakening, thirst by drinking, hunger by the speed with which he grabs whatever moves, and further chews on wads of nesting. When I stranded my boat in the early dawn on a sandbar known as Women's Sand, I couldn't help but laugh at the irony of it all. It was a somewhat flat and bumpy shallow, and I'd landed pretty straight up, so there wasn't the imminent danger of falling helplessly sideways, though the waves were relentlessly pounding the keel down hard. The thing is, I've been racing myself down for days to go pick up my woman. Up at all times of day and night to get the tides right, sailing 15 hours on end, with forecasts that somehow always underestimated the weather. The longest halts had been for engine repairs, finding me holed up in the belly of the beast, covered in grease and bilge bile. And there I was, ripping the bolts out of the coupling, changing forward to backward, frantically trying to get off the one shallow for miles around. And the dawn smiled upon this silly man who'd taken the full moon for a guide across unknown waters. Perfect wind on the high quarter, smooth sails tearing the old lady up and over the short stack waves. Completely oversailed the mark, partly due to a bit of a faulty compass, partly to the rush of sailing for hours. After 4 hours of repairs, followed by 10 hours of motoring canals and locks, which leads to a somewhat negligent navigation and no sense of time whatsoever. So when peering over the map with weary bloodshot eyes, I found that not only I'd passed the port of call by a flat 18 miles, but that the place I'd so drastically come to a hold on was actually a typical stranding spot for weary seagoing husbands. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I did a bit of both. Though as usual, laughter prevailed as I looked out over the waters and the sky crowned with a rising sun fringed with fine clouds, a drowning full moon and slowly fading stars that drifted into the folding cloak of night, while the seagulls fished for an early breakfast. Channel 16 on the VHF is made for cases like this, and much worse. So without much further, I found myself boarded by a friendly chap in survivor gear. He hooked up a line and strap and started going, ah, no, as he wondered at the time capsule that is my old little ship, asking permission to take pictures of what he called a sailing museum and a cabinet of rarities, though I must confess, as yet it's without such things as shrunken heads and eunuchs' penises preserved in alcohol, nor mermaids' fins or a unicorn horn. But it does breed an air of old freedom and scurvy, which in many ports turns heads to call it a lost pirate ship. Now, I don't as a rule rub any of the fancy yachts of today, though some surely deserve a fair stripping of excess wealth. What I do seem to be stealing, however, belongs to everyone and no one in particular. Is the old, age-old right to roam, the freedom and the suffering that goes with making up life as it comes along, ever gorged with a hunger for more. I steal time away from the routine slumber, as people turn and lose track of their boredom in the split second they watch a little dream sail by. And in doing so, I claim to give it back to their own true minds. I give a grand standing middle finger to the sentinels of normality as I hold traffic by getting the bridge troll to give me a rite of passage and putter, putter, putter through the open bridge with its deck reaching for the heavens. Not fearing the chaos that is the world and existence as a whole is an art, the art of life. Not using the knowledge that creation involves destruction as a mere excuse for random casual carelessness and morbid sadism is an art, the art of life. Not rejecting everything, everyone, and truly yourself for all imperfections and inexplicables is an art, the art of life. Daring to create the world and yourself in it, and the times of day and night, not by leftover impressions from before, or scrap and regurgitated tradition, but by dancing the dream awake. It's an art, the art of life. What moved the first person who painted, playfully threaded empty cockles on a vine and hung it around his or her neck, or gave it away, maybe exchanging it for a bite or fur or an oddly shaped rock? When the dancing shadows emanating from the crackling fire played along the walls of their caves, did they paint them so as to keep them fixed there like a still shot clipped from a film? Do I write about my life to make it real, somehow more tangible? And my sense of things a gift and barter to others? A mirror to my mirror that reflects the shattered fragments of ever evolution, like dancing shadows in the cave that is my skull, through the fire that is my heartbeat, the passion that is life? The floating lasted a long time, if time exists. The long stander lost its bark as man stripped it to chew, or ripped in long lengths and twined to wicker and weave the remaining branches into the first hull. He stranded once on a plain of shallow brackish water, where he jumped off and pulled this way and that till the current freed his vessel, and he jumped back on and continued his floating journey. Once on a little island, where he stayed a while and found scaly non-leggeds in shallow pools, and little creatures with hollow rocks for a dwelling, tough to eat. He found long-helmed grass there and bundled a pile of it into his nest. There were a bunch of small four-legged ones hopping around, but he couldn't catch them, and they seemed to make a play out of making him try, sitting perfectly still till he dove at them and then furtively hopping away and looking back as if to mock him. He'd started swinging sticks and throwing rocks, and they didn't like him for trying, but to no avail. Putting down more long, thick woods along the trunk seemed a good idea, so he did, surprising himself with both effort and result. So he left that island, that little island, on an even smaller, floating island, that he now pushed along with a long, thick pole that touched the riverbed. When a strong, standing, high wind blew more than ripples in the water, ripples in the ripples, ripples running into patterns, overlapping and building, acting and counteracting, and thus creating waves. Ripples on waves of rippling, staggering, mounting and succumbing water, till the sand and rocks below started rippling, rocking and a-rolling. Such ripples in the water that his vessel threatened to leave without him, and a ripple of choices made in a split second, long before time was ever invented, passed under his hair and made his nose twitch as he jumped on with a stick in his hand and a somewhat stiff drizzler. More control than ever now grew on him. Like years teach survival to those lucky enough not to succumb to the ease of death. He could see no banks to the slow waters he was crossing, except for distant misty shapes of standers and rock faces. Though the current was weak, his effort to cross them to what he figured was dry land came to nothing, and so he simply floated, poled along, and when putting his face in the waters to drink, tried to grab the scaly, non-legged things that lived down there. One bit him in the sniffer one white-lit night, and he pulled it up, smashed it, and ate for 3 days.